Okay, good job. Raaheela Ahmed, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I know, it's awesome. You're a board member at Prince George's County for the Board of Education and the first Hijabi to ever be elected into a Maryland public office.
Yes.
How does that feel?
Surreal and honestly a little bit sad that that wasn't already done. It just blows my mind that we're in the 21st century now and we're still having firsts in different fields and different positions of power. Like,
It's
why
just
is that a
weird.
thing?
It's
Yeah.
weird that you're the first hijab. Like when I
Mhm.
heard that, you're so young that no one has done that before you, mashallah. So it was shocking, and like you said, it was upsetting at the same time. Well,
Yeah.
when were you elected into a public office?
Oh, I was elected, I believe I was 23 when I was sworn in. But I first ran for office when I was 18 years old. And so that was an experience all in itself. I was fresh out of high school, a second semester freshman in college, and that's when I decided to run. But it was really a long time coming. And to kind of share with you, Mahmoud, a little bit about what led up to that. First and foremost, I am the daughter of immigrants. My father's an immigrant from India, and my mom is an immigrant from Pakistan, and they came here at different points in their life. But it's because of my dad that I'm here right now, hands down. And his influence and his capacity to be a role model to me and my sister. Because when he moved to the United States, he was about my age now, he was in his mid-20s. And within 10 years of him moving to the United States, decided that he wanted to run for office. And so he ran for office for the first time for state delegate in Maryland in the community that I live in, that I now represent, when I was 5 years old. And so me and my sister were out and we had little vote for my dad signs, and we were going out at parades with him when we were 5. And he lost that race and he ran again 4 years later, and I was 9. And at that point in time, me and my sister used to have sleepover parties with our cousins and assembly lines for mail. So we would be folding and stuffing and sealing and stamping envelopes with information about him and why he was running for that certain position. He lost that race as well, and then I started going, but ran again 4 years later. And at that time I was around 13 and started going door to door. And I think that was really the time where I felt a lot. Like, I was a young teen going door to door trying to convince people that, not only is this my dad, but this is someone that's worth your time and worth your vote. At a time where I don't know that our community was as accepting of his differences as I think it is now. And so I felt, and this was also post 9/11, so there was a lot of Islamophobia, there was a lot of xenophobia, racism. It was just a lot of different isms that I felt trying to be a person that was presenting my father to people that maybe didn't know him.
How old were you then?
13.
So I read in the article that you experienced some
Mm-hmm.
Islamophobia or anti-Islamic hatred when you went door to door, grassroots. Well, what was that experience like? What were they kind of saying?
I think the most interesting pieces for me were actually on my own race. I think being a child and going door to door, there were nuances, but it wasn't overt. I think folks that I was encountering had at least that level of, like, I may not vote for this person's father, but I'm not gonna completely, like, push her down. But when I was 18 and I was an adult and I was running for that seat, that was not the situation. That was not the case. And so it manifested itself in different ways. And one of the ways, it was literally someone came up to my mom and said, "I'm not voting for any damn Arabs," and kept walking. And I was like, okay. And she was just kind of like, okay. That was a moment. But there was also subtle ways of folks feeling and addressing and not fully understanding what the Islamic faith is and what it's about. For example, there was one conversation that I had with a constituent at the door when I was 18 in 2012 that just simply was asking me, I understand that your faith is personal and that it is important to you, but is it important that you wear your hijab, you wear your scarf on your literature? If it's personal and if that's what faith is to you, then why is it public in this way? And was actually trying to understand, but also trying to persuade me in a certain way to think about maybe not putting my hijab, a picture of me in my hijab on literature, or having me in my literature without my hijab. And so that was like a very interesting, I was there.
Was that a board member?
This was just a member of my community, just going door to door. And we had a really authentic, honest conversation about like how I want to be as authentic in my personal life as I am or would like to be in my public life, and making sure that congruency is also a value for me, right? But it was eye-opening in the sense of like it was just kind of out of left field and not really understanding and knowing where that person was coming from and coming to common ground about it.
How did you respond to that person?
Yeah, I think it was just for me just sitting and hearing out like what is that perspective and where is the value, where are my values in that perspective, and just kind of going back and forth because it wasn't combative. I think that's the big piece that I realized and recognized about people and about the way that folks interact. It's not always like profuse hatred. It can be just concern, confusion, and ignorance. And trying to take that mindset of maybe this person just doesn't know, and let me take a minute to have this conversation, as opposed to taking it as this person doesn't know anything about Islam and is like, really, this is like a problem and he's being Islamophobic in all these ways, and like having that type of mentality. I really think that for me, every time that I face something like that, even if it was like overt, for me I compartmentalized it into being like, this person doesn't know. This person has not walked through my shoes, doesn't know my perspective, doesn't know how I was raised. And so this is the perspective I'm going to have about this situation, even if a part of me and other people seeing it might have seen it as something of an ism.
So in the face of ignorance, you kind of deal with it with patience and trying to understand them. And a lot of my friends, like I told you before we even started, aren't even Muslim. So that's, to this day, I have friends going, I don't know, man, like the Islamic terrorism, why is it only the Middle East that's like that? So they do have their own opinions on Islam that are clearly negative. But I try to answer their questions. That's all I can do. If I hate them, if I degrade them, if I call them bigger, they're just going to hate me and then hate Islam even more. You see those statistics online that shows that knowing one Muslim, like, dramatically decreases your chances of hating Muslims in the future.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, just knowing one Muslim. Yeah.
It's also, though, Mahmoud, that's a lot of pressure, right? Like, what if you were that one? And I think that's something that I put on my shoulders often as well, especially going into the public space of like, okay, I'm going to leave the door today. I'm going to go knock on some doors. I'm going to go meet some people. I may be the first hijabi Muslim South Asian woman that they have met. And I need to represent my communities, and I need to represent my family and be that person, so that when folks see or think about any of those identities, they know, oh, hey, I had a great interaction, or I had a great conversation with Raheela about XYZ. And so I think in some sense that's a lot of pressure, right? And I understood that like some of that is me taking that upon myself. But I do think that is something of a case for some other folks in my community as well, of like, are you going to be the first person that someone interacts with that is like you? And the weight of that interaction, how that will then transcend and move forward in how other people then perceive your identities. So that's a piece too.
It's a responsibility. It's a heavy responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
The way I kind of approach it is I embrace it. I enjoy it. I love it, and I was telling you that earlier because
Yeah.
I'm a philosophy mind. So
Mm-hmm.
when someone comes up to me and they go, "I love Islam. I agree with Islam. I love everything about Muslims," I'm like, "Yeah, okay, thank you, man. Appreciate you. Love you too, right?" But when someone's like, "I hate Islam," I'm like, "Yes, let's go. How are you? How you doing today?" Right? Like I genuinely get excited. I know that's not the case for everyone, but what I want to get to you with is what besides campaigning,
Mm-hmm.
what was your experience like growing up in the United States as a Muslim woman?
Oh my gosh. I think I really bucket it pre 9/11 and post 9/11. I remember very clearly going to my mosque after 9/11.
How old were you?
I'm trying to figure that out. I was about 8 years old, so I remember after 9/11 going to my mosque and women at my mosque just in tears, like breaking down and sharing their stories of how they were treated. Um, Hijabs being ripped off, slurs being thrown at them, mistreatment from colleagues, mistreatment from strangers. Like being that young and seeing that and hearing that and feeling that emotion from other Muslim women, I think that was a pivotal point for me. And I began to see things differently um, after that time. Before that time, I don't know that I would have been able to like put it together in that way. I mean, I understood and I saw people looking at me and my when I was out with my mom and my grandmother, who both also wear hijab, looking at us differently. I remember that. I remember folks also, interacting with my father differently, who has an accent. I remember those pieces and those elements of things. But after that time period, I think I just started seeing more and more and more and more of it. And it manifested itself in different ways, like I said before. So I think that was the pivotal moment.
Did you go to public school?
I did.
What was that like? When did you start wearing the hijab?
I started wearing the hijab when I started in high school. So I was around 14 years old.
Mm.
And I think what really helped me
was it a choice? I have to ask this because people are always like, so was it a choice?
Yeah,
okay.
It was most definitely a choice that I made.
Midway through high school, you were 16.
No, starting freshman year in high school is when I started.
Why'd you decide to wear it?
I felt like it gave me an outsider's perspective on myself. Like I felt like it was in wearing hijab, I was able to see things from a third person's perspective of situations, and that's what I felt in that moment. And even reflecting back on it, I do think that still holds true for me. It was very much about modesty, but also about introspection and like, am I holding true to my values? Am I actually practicing what I preach? Oh, hey, this what I'm wearing right now is a reminder of my faith. And am I doing all those things that I value? Am I behaving in ways with people that I respect and that I can say I honor what I hold to be true? And so for me, it was the accountability piece. It was the modesty piece. It was really like checking myself. And so that those were my motivations of doing it. I think it helped me that I had my mother and my grandmothers as role models that I saw live this way, and I admired and I wanted to be like them, right? I wanted to have that type of confidence that they had, where they honestly, I'm thinking back and I'm like, they didn't give any F's, like nothing. They would just go about their lives and do their business and be the powerful strong women. And seeing that, I don't see how anyone would see that growing up and not want to be that, not want to be close to that. And for me, I wanted to be close to that. I wanted to be that type of a woman. And so that's really what motivated me to start wearing hijab when I was 14. And I was also blessed in that when I went from middle school to high school, I went to a high school that didn't have a lot of the folks that I went to middle school with. And so I was able to like start fresh and start that new slate. There were some folks that came over, but for me I didn't have to explain myself as much as maybe someone who had the same full cohort of folks from middle school into high school. I explained myself to my friends, like, this is what I do and this is why I'm doing it. But for everybody else, this was just, oh, hey, this is Raheela. This is who she is. That's the only Raheela that they ever knew. And I think that's also a piece and an element of it as well, of that transition can be so hard. And I just feel like I was so blessed in that I didn't have to feel like I had to explain myself to so many people. And I felt like I was so confident in my rationalization of why I was going into this that when someone did ask, I was like, oh, here, this is what it is.
Do you think your faith was ready to put on the hijab?
I think my faith was ready. I think my faith was strongest when I started, and in the years that followed. Maybe that 5-year period, that 6-year period of starting in my teenage years was the strongest period of my faith. I think now I'm at a place where I need to reassess and recheck myself. And so I think for me, it's that's been my journey, right? I feel like I started off really strong, and now I'm like, I don't know, there's so much, and I'm seeing more hate. I'm feeling that hate. I'm questioning, are things really the way that I appeared and thought them to be? So I think I'm going through my questioning phase now. Like,
why is that happening? Because
yeah.
Would we agree that there was more Muslim hate back then than there is now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why is that happening?
That's a really good question, Mahmoud. I'm trying to figure it out. I think for me, it's just really hard to be the perfect Muslim. Like, I think it's really at that point where I'm at is like, I'm not perfect and I cannot continue to try to be perfect. And so giving myself grace and not being perfection, that's where I'm at, and where not necessarily my questioning comes in, because I do think that I'm very firm in the values that I hold and what comes from the faith that I really believe in when it comes to values. But I think it's more of just trying to navigate what it's like to have baggage, and come to terms with that baggage and understand that there's going to be a whole lot of baggage moving forward, and how to address that and rectify that with faith.
What you mean by baggage is kind of like the sins and actions you've done in the past.
Sins. Also, being in elected office, working with people. My profession as an elected official has a bad rap for trust, dishonesty, lying, cheating. That's what some folks think of when they think of politics. There's truth to that.